And now, live from the studios of Freedom's Phoenix, Ernest Hancock.
There's something happening here. What it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there, telling me I got to beware. I think it's time.
He's not telling me anything. Here on Declare Your Independence of me, Ernest Hancock, we're talking about what happened in Tucson. We got Mr. William Buppert. Bill is on with us from Tucson. He's a retired Army officer, and he's been involved. I tell you where I first met Bill. I had read a lot of his stuff. He posts on Lou Rockwell quite a bit and on Freedom's Phoenix. And we were at an Appleseed shooting event, a training thing they do over the weekend, and a bunch of us took our wives and girlfriends and so on and got some rifle training. Well, as part of the process, they also teach you about the shot heard around the world and the history of the beginnings of the American Revolution, and really kind of the tactic, why it's important to be able to handle a firearm, certainly a rifle. And we struck up a conversation and had him on the show a few times. He has an article, very good article. It's in the E-zine that's coming out this weekend. And Bill had asked me if I could go down Monday, and I just couldn't. We had to do that, but I knew we were well represented. If Bill was there, I didn't have to be, you know what I mean? And Drew got video that will start coming out here in the next couple of days. We had Sheriff Mack and Stuart Rhodes down there, and all of these guys have been speakers at our summit, our Freedom Summit, over the years, and, you know, on the show. So I knew we were in good hands, or I would have felt more compelled to go down there. But Bill, you know, tell me, one thing that is of interest to me, we find out later that the gentleman, I don't want to say his name because I don't know how to pronounce it. Now, I'll give you that honor. But he was represented by his wife, and I can't imagine that she could just either be silent or contain her emotions. Can you help me paint the picture of her participation?
I can. She was there along with members of her family, and during the presentation that was done after the initial speeches and such, when descriptions of what happened to Jose Guerena were described, she started wailing. She started crying out loud. I mean, it was just absolutely heart-wrenching. She didn't have much to say, and that's probably because she was uncomfortable speaking in front of crowds, and she may have simply been uncomfortable because of what had happened and what she's been going through in the last nearly a month with the death of her husband. But later in the afternoon, when we were giving our speeches for the Oath Keepers event, after the memorial at her home, she sat there in the front row, and each of us had the honor and the opportunity to look her square in the face and say, for various reasons, apologies, and why we were so ashamed, whether at the local level or the national level, of all the policies and all the behavior and the government intervention that led to the death of her husband and the father of her two young children. Wow.
Tell us about Oath Keepers. I know we had Stuart Rhodes speak at our Freedom Summit. They had, after the event, they had an Oath Keeper meeting and got to meet a lot of these guys. And what many people may not know, you know, just not any and everybody gets to be in the Oath Keepers. I mean, the whole point, I remember the same mentality that was trying to be espoused by Jack McLam, you know, police and military against the New World Order, and, you know, Vampire Killer 2000 and all. And the point that Jack made, he goes, and he was a very highly decorated, the most decorated officer in the Phoenix Police Department. They kept trying to fire him. You know, they do, and he get rehired and fired and rehired, and so he's up in Idaho now. And Jack was, I remember in the mid-'90s as a young activist, him coming and speaking, and he made it clear. He goes, we know what's coming. Sooner or later, the policies of this government are going to have to be enacted by people on the ground. The tip of the spear is going to be the police and the military. And that's when they started to do this multi-jurisdictional task force stuff and terrorist this and that. All this stuff was just to create the militarization of local police. And now with fusion centers and all this stuff, we have that power. Oh, got to get terrorists. Gotta get drug war, gotta get whatever the heck the reason du jour is. But what it was is it just gave military equipment and training and power to enforce the stupidest laws and that don't harm anybody. It's not keeping with the Declaration of Independence, though. The real contract. Look, this is why we're doing this. And when they become abusive of individual rights, it's time to alter or abolish. Well, what's happened is it's come to fruition exactly what he warned us of. Now we have the next generation. Stuart Rhodes comes out, goes to law enforcement and military and says, hey, man, all we want you to do is just reaffirm the oath that you take anyway. Well, I've had Heidi Byrick. She's the director of special projects for the Southern Poverty Law Center. She's been on my show probably 3 times. And I'm nice to her, and we go at it. We go at it. We have a good time. I suggest you just Google Heidi Byrick or Southern Poverty Law Center and Ernest Hancock. You want to listen to those shows? Ooh, didn't come no slack. But nice enough that they keep coming back for more. You just got to wonder about that. What happens, though, is they look at people that would take their oath seriously as a threat to national security. They're saying on their watch list are oath keepers. And I'm like, why? I mean, but they won't follow orders from the commander-in-chief. And I'm like, are you kidding me? That's your reasoning. Because they will uphold and defend the Constitution and the oath that they've taken. That's what makes them bad. Is that right? Absolutely. I mean, no bones about it. So I'm going, okay. So I want you to share with the audience your experience with Oath Keepers and what you see as their mission.
Okay. Stuart can speak with much more alacrity and depth to what Oath Keepers is about, but your preamble before you asked that question was a great introduction to what they're about, which is basically that whatever your constitutional oath, which is usually demanded or commensurate with the duties of being a cop or in the military, one swears an oath of allegiance to how you're going to behave within left and right constraints. So that's what it's about, is that if, for instance, during New Orleans, if the cops were asked, you will start seizing guns in spite of what the Second Amendment allows people to do, that cops, Stuart hopes that with the Oath Keepers, that cops would have the ability to say, well, no, I think I'm going to pass. I'm not going to do that because in my mind that's clearly an unlawful order. And I have to give credit to Stuart for having me there in the first place, because Ernie, and for those who are listening right now who aren't aware of it, I am not a constitutionalist by any stretch. I used to be one. I am no longer an adherent of constitutionalism. I don't tolerate people saying that's unconstitutional. We need to get back to the Constitution because all they're telling me is that they want to go back to big government. In the end, that's what it turns into. But I'm glad, and I give props to the Oath Keepers, because at least they're sort of meeting me halfway and saying there are certain things that are beyond the pale for law enforcement to do. As you and I have talked about in the past, if it weren't for cops and tax collectors, our freedom would not be in the hazard that it is in today. And you also mentioned earlier, you said, well, killing people in the name of stupid laws. Essentially, every law, whether it's a seatbelt law, whether it's a law for the diameter of tangerines in California, whatever the case may be, all those laws carry an ultimate penalty of death, because that's the way law enforcement views its mission. You've seen it time and time again with the protests that you participated in, Ernie, and the videos that you posted and such. Police brutality, what happened to Guerena in Tucson on May 5th? That happens every hour across the United States, that kind of violent entry. Now, how many folks are murdered by the police? I'll tell you, I think it's severely underreported. And even if it is reported, for the most part, the media tends to be cop fetishist, or at least tolerate the PR machine that the police and the police unions roll out every time.
They are the PR machine.
Yes, they are.
They're just waiting. It's news by government handout. I've been in the newsrooms. I mean, local radio affiliates. I know how it works. Here comes the memo. Did you get the memo? Yes, they did, and the talking head read it. They said, this is what happened, and this is what you're supposed to think about it. Well, we're going to tell people what we think about it when we come back with Bill Buppert down in southern Arizona, retired Army officer that knows better. We might even talk a little bit about that and his mindset of what his job was and what it is now in the private sector. We'll be right back here on Declare Your Independence in just a little bit.